We have three things for you this morning. We do an annual survey now of the business community. When we first started this program, we were asked for a location, and I thought it was a lot of fun. Scott Theobald was the president of what was then Town and Country Bank, and he said, "I don't have a place to do it." And I said, "What about the dining room?" He said, "Oh, great idea. I think you would be pretty pleased with the way this has progressed now. This is our fourth year of doing this together. Very excited to have Partnership Bank as our partner, and Nate will be up in a minute to make some comments. But every year now we're trying to do an economic survey of the state of business in Watertown specifically. And so we're going to have one of our senior business management students, Zach Zimmerman, come and present what we found this past fall, and then Nate will come and talk about the branding of the city of Watertown, and then Wyman Winston will come and give an economic forecast for the year. So Zach, come on up.
Good morning. My name is Zach Zimmerman, as Mr. Board has already introduced. This morning it's my pleasure to present to you the data found in the second annual Watertown Business Survey. Before I get into the data, I'd like to take a moment to recognize some of the people that made this survey possible. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Nate Salas from Partnership Bank, who first proposed the survey almost 2 years ago and continues to be a great advocate for it. Second, I would like to thank our very own Steve Ford and Corey Foffey, who worked with Nate Salas to year after year, this second year, hopefully years to come, to make the survey possible. I'd also like to thank you, the people of, I'd also like to thank Watertown Chamber of Commerce and Watertown Economic Development Office for their cooperation. But most importantly, I would like to thank you, the CEOs, professionals, and decision makers of each and every Watertown business that participated in this survey and helps us to gather the data we have today. You are the ones that really make this survey possible, and we hope that you can benefit from what we present here. I'd like to begin with the purpose and background of the survey, followed by some positive and negative observations, and end with the top things Watertown business leaders believe the Watertown government can do to improve Watertown business climate. First, the purpose of Watertown Business Survey is to understand Watertown business leaders' sentiment and compare theirs with reports by surveys of Wisconsin and U.S. CEOs, business owners, and primary decision makers. Conducted long-term, the survey will provide year-to-year comparisons of local business sentiment. The survey was first conducted in the fall of 2014 using survey items adapted from two organizations who collect data about business outlook of Wisconsin and the United States. The first survey was conducted by interview. However, we have since upgraded to an online survey instrument. The online format will make the survey easier to disperse and will help the data to be more complete and objective. This year being our second annual survey, is the first year we can compare year-to-year results. Now, onto our survey data. The first question we asked businesses were for their number of employees. The 2014 survey showed that 92% of the 63 surveyed businesses had employment of 50 or fewer workers, while the 2015 survey showed that 28% of the 47 participating businesses had employment of 50 or fewer workers. Though this is not statistically significant, it does show that upon further investigation, Watertown is not as small business as the first survey would suggest. This being said, Watertown is still very pro-small business compared to the state as a whole. A state survey conducted January 2015 showed that out of 308 respondents, only 32% reported 50 or fewer employees. When asked if they thought Watertown the economy would improve, remain the same, or worsen in the next 12 months, 2014 Watertown respondents were split, with 46% expecting the economy to improve and 43% expecting the economy to worsen over the next 12 months. The 2015 survey showed a slight raise in sentiment towards remain the same. However, due to the small survey size and incremental change, the difference is statistically insignificant enough to draw any solid conclusions. Is the Watertown government pro-business, somewhat pro-business, neutral, somewhat anti-business, or very anti-business? In the 2014 survey, 53% of Watertown business respondents stated that the Watertown government was either very pro-business or somewhat pro-business, while 15% believed that Watertown government is somewhat or very anti-business. 2015 sentiment improved slightly, with 58% of Watertown area businesses believing that Watertown government was either very or somewhat pro-business, and 15 stating the opposite. Sentiment rose this year in regards to Watertown's current direction. When asked if Watertown was headed in the right direction or was on the wrong track, 70% of 2014 respondents stated that Watertown was headed in the right direction, while 30% believed it was in the wrong track. Sentiment has improved, however, because in 2015, 79% of respondents believed Watertown was headed in the right direction, and only 21% thought it was on the wrong track.
Next slide, Zach.
Yeah, there we go. When asked if they experienced trouble hiring last year, 37% of Watertown employees responded yes, while this year, 59% of respondents experienced hiring trouble. When asked what their main reason was for hiring trouble, they blamed the lack of qualified applicants, followed by worker availability and irresponsible workers. Could it be that the increase in hiring trouble is due to the larger number of large businesses participating in this year's survey? I don't know, possibly. Finally, the last question we posed to respondents was, what is the number one thing Watertown could do to improve Watertown business climate? They could only answer with one item. This is what they came up with. In 2014, Watertown business leaders stated that becoming more pro-business in general and increasing spending for local economic development were the top two answers, 44 and 25% respectively. This year, the top responses switched, with increased spending for local economic development being first at 43%, followed by becoming more pro-business at 23%. Close ties for third were reduced local property tax and reduced local regulations, both at 8% for respondents. In conclusion, fellow students, please take full advantage of every semester and every class. Please finish your education and strive to be qualified applicants. To government and business leaders, please continue to work together to improve the local economic development. And thank you, Watertown government. The results of the survey show that Watertown's current business sentiment is improving, and some credit is due to you for that improvement. To every business represented in the audience, if you have not participated in the Watertown Business Survey, please take the time and effort to make your voice heard. And if you have completed the survey in the past, thank you. And we please invite your friends, business friends, to join you in participating in the Fall 2016 Watertown Business Survey. Mr. Nate Salas, President of Partnership Bank and our host here today, I turn the floor to you.
Morning, everybody. Can you hear me without the mic? Is that good? No? All right. I don't like being stuck behind a podium. That's not kind of how I roll, so to speak. Let's see here if this will work. I'm not going to try. I'll stay here. So, first of all, I want to make sure, thank Zach and the other students, as well as Corey Foffey, Steve Board, and the survey, is something that we talked about a couple of years ago, and just trying to get information to this crowd and to our community. And so I appreciate their persistence and effort, and look forward to future years and results, and we can learn from that. This, like Steve mentioned, is our 4th year partnering with Maranatha, and I just want to talk about the bank quick. You know, why do we choose to partner with Maranatha on economic breakfast for the community? Why do we work with the police department and help keep kids protected with our Kid ID program? Why do we partner with the school district and some of their programs? Really simply put, our bank really feels we've got a responsibility to take care of the community. That's it. And we feel the best way our bank can achieve that is by being in the community. You know, working shoulder to shoulder alongside all of you to help make our community stronger. So if you share those same values, all we ask is keep us in mind. Next time you look to build a house, buy a house, refinance, something for your business, give us a call. We'd sure like a shop to partner with you on that. So that's all I've got for my infomercial. Sweet. Hopefully you're okay with that. But I spent a little time here talking about the branding of the community. And I've had an opportunity the last couple of years to be part of a commission. There's probably some names behind me, hopefully. Yes, excellent. And you know, this started Public Works Commission, and they were talking about some signage coming into town, signage across town, all different aspects of the watered-down government. You know, and the mayor was sitting there, and they started listening, and I think they sat down and said, hold on, what's our message? What are we sending out there? We should step back and understand what it is we want to project, not only to our community, but externally to surrounding communities. And I think that was great foresight on the mayor's part, as well as the other commission members that were sitting there talking that day. So we spent the last several years, and it's a great mix, as you can tell behind me. We've got some great people in the community that have donated their time. And we realized we needed experts. So we sat down and looked at probably 4 or 5 different companies throughout the country, and their expertise is helping communities brand themselves. Why is a brand important? Most of you guys are in business, probably understand that. But for a government, we're in business too. This city's got to compete with cities around us. You know, we're trying to vie to bring in new businesses, to retain our businesses. And we need to have a message that's consistent and clear. And part of that too is community pride factor. And so we went out and found a couple of companies that are experts at it, narrowed it down to DCI out of Colorado. They've worked with other communities in our state, did an excellent job. But part of that process, it wasn't in a vacuum that we created this brand or this logo. We had over 500 of our community members and stakeholders involved in focus groups, surveys, one-on-one conversations. And then DCI also went out externally and talked with 500 plus people to get their perception of our community. So that kind of tells you how we went through this process. What we wanted to do is kind of collate all the data and get a feel, a sentiment, right? How do we view ourselves? Versus residents versus stakeholders. Also, how do people outside of our community view us? And I think it was pretty interesting. The takeaway really is, you know, we're harder on ourselves than anybody else is. And that was pretty consistent with DCI told with other communities. You know, I like this. This is like a little word collage. The words that are biggest and brightest and boldest are the ones that were used the most when asked and talked about in surveys and communication. This is from stakeholders. You see words like conservative, but you see words like potential, friendly, historic, river. This is person on the street. You know, we talk about having a community pride factor. And, you know, it starts with every one of us. And the word that bothers me the most is probably the word you see is water-tucky. Funny, but sad, right? Because we all think of, well, water-tucky, Kentucky, and no offense to anybody from Kentucky. But it's disappointing that you see this about our people in our community. And this is why this brand, this logo is so important, because we need to take responsibility individually, everyone in this room, business owners, residents, community members, community leaders, and start spreading a different message. And it starts with each of us. It is really that simple. Because we need to overcome something like this, because I'm going to show you this next slide. This is people that, outside of our community, water, small town, family, don't know. When we go through results, don't know was like the second response over 500 plus people gave when they asked about Watertown. Another reason we need this brand and this logo, because we need a consistent message. What do we want to transmit externally? How are we going to attract people, attract businesses? We need a message. So we not only need to overcome our internal issues and not thinking poorly about ourselves, that self-image aspect, but we need a message that goes external. Next couple slides just show some responses. Internally, here's the things we thought that were really important to us in our community. The top 3. Quality education. I mean, we're in a college here. We've got Luther Preparatory Academy in our community. Then we've got a great school system. Quality of life, small town values. I think probably a lot of things resonate with most of you out there. Outsiders characteristics. First was low cost of living. They saw us between Milwaukee and Madison. Second one, again, no association. They're just, so they don't know who we are. We gotta get a message out there. And then we started asking, what could we be known for? So DCI helped collect this information, and all this was taken in, aggregated. We wanted to develop something, again, a brand. We wanted to have a promise to the community. So I'm gonna read this because it's kind of lengthy, and I'll break it down into how we got to the logo and just the branding tagline, so to speak. But our promise, our branding promise, halfway between Madison and Milwaukee, with the Rock River coursing through its historic downtown, the city of Watertown is an ideal and idyllic location for companies and people looking for a place where family and fellowship still matter. Here, residents cherish history and tradition, but also see a community full of excellent education, the pride that comes from an honest day's work, and the importance of a strong foundation guided by a moral compass. In essence, Watertown is a city flowing with potential, offering the perfect bridge between nostalgia and modern convenience. Simply put, opportunity runs through it. And I hope you have a chance to think about those words, because we felt pretty strongly that should resonate with people based on the information we got. It's a great balance. We understand who we are. We just need to rally around that and project that externally and be proud of that. So we took that brand promise, as you see it here. Opportunity runs through it, brings it, ties it all together, and spend some time looking at then the logo. The logo is a part of the brand. It's not the brand itself, but we wanted to draw on some things. We talk about architecture, historical buildings, we talk about our river. So there's been a lot of time thinking about it. So when you see this logo, it wasn't just, hey, we love those colors, I think this looks neat. There was a lot of thought that went into this. You can tell there's the bridge and the river connections. Also, people holding arms together, showing promise and opportunity. The W for Watertown, and a strong foundation. And you know, if we look at the colors, you know, green's a vibrant color, opportunity, growth, spring, things are possible. Blues with the river. There's a lot of thought that goes to it. When you tie it together, that's what we are. We're the city of Watertown. Opportunity runs through it. And so we want to spend a few minutes this morning sharing that with you. And hopefully if you've got more questions, you saw the names in the slide, you can definitely ask any one of us on the commission what's planned. In 2015 was a very soft launch. We kind of finalized that 2-year process at the end of last year. 2016, we've got a more focused approach. We're going to look for some continuity and consistency from the city and city governments, things throughout our community. But we're also asking our businesses to think about ways that you can promote this brand. Have these conversations with your neighbor, with the people that you work with your employees. Because again, it starts with each of us having some pride in the community and sharing our message. If you'd like to add this brand logo to your signature block, contact Jane Allen, the city. We'll get you a copy. We'll slap it on there. Obviously, it's important to us going forward. So I want to spend a few minutes sharing that with everybody here, because a lot of you in this room also helped participate and put that together for the community. And those are the results. And so we look forward to this year and the years to come to continue to promote that community pride, promote our brand externally. All right, so let's transition into why you're probably here. It's not for me, probably maybe for the food, but we had a great opportunity this year to have Wyman Winston join us. So I want to read a little bit about Wyman, and then I'll have him come up and have a conversation with us. So Governor Scott Walker appointed Wyman Winston as WHEDA's Executive Director effective January 3rd, 2011. Mr. Winston is committed to leveraging WHEDA's resources, including his professional staff of highly motivated individuals, to help communities meet their affordable housing needs while also fostering business growth and job creation in Wisconsin. Since his appointment by Governor Walker, WHEDA has enjoyed noteworthy accomplishments that have created jobs, helped small businesses, and provide housing opportunities for residents all across Wisconsin. Mr. Winston served on the Governor's Task Force on Minority Unemployment and the Council on Workforce Investment. He is also president of the Greater Wisconsin Opportunities Fund, a community development entity. Under Mr. Winston's leadership, along with support from the governor, state legislature, WHEDA members of the board and employees, and many partners, WHEDA has invested over $1 billion in Wisconsin for affordable housing and economic development. Mr. Winston has utilized WHEDA's innovative financing products and tools to do the following: create new programs to help small businesses create jobs, provide catalytic economic development investment to low-income Wisconsin communities, finance the construction, rehabilitation, or refinancing of affordable rental developments across Wisconsin, reestablish WHEDA as a mortgage lender to low and moderate income families here in Wisconsin. In 2012, Governor Walker and Executive Director Winston unveiled Transform Milwaukee, a public-private initiative focusing on restoring economic vitality to Wisconsin's largest city. Through WHEDA financing and public-private partnerships, the initiative has generated over $275 million in development in Milwaukee alone. Prior to his current employment, Mr. Winston spent 14 years at WHEDA as a senior manager, first in multifamily and later heading the emerging markets group. Outside of WHEDA, he spent 10 years at other redevelopment authorities. And on a personal note, he loves the lake, he loves the water, and so do his grandkids. So let's welcome Mr. Wyman Winston up here.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am really delighted to be here on behalf of the governor, his cabinet, my colleagues. I want to report to you some of the good things that are going on in the state and what's in front of us. And I want to acknowledge both the president of this great university, its faculty and students, and leaders and citizens of Watertown. I'm really delighted to be here. I want to begin with where's Wisconsin at today? We have come out of what was a pretty severe recession, and there's some indications of what you and communities across the state has done to improve the economic and quality of life of citizens in our great state. I'll begin with that, as reported by the governor, that our recent unemployment rate in the state of Wisconsin is the lowest since March of 2001. Late last year, we saw the largest monthly job gain since April of 1992. The percentage of people working in Wisconsin, as described by labor force participation rate, is 67.8%. This is 5.3% better than the national rate, and it puts us in the top 10 states in America. What that simply means is that Wisconsin is in the top 10 in the efficiency of the adults who can work are working. In fact, it ties with the survey results of many companies having challenges of finding workers, is that as baby boomers are retiring and millennials and young workers come in, there is a gap, particularly in this decade, we're going to see, because now that the economy is back, we simply have more jobs than we have employees, and then that's complicated by the demands and skills as employers that you need. And so when you add both the gap in employees and then add that they may not be job ready depending upon the job and the skills required, that is part of the tension, and I can tell you that every community in this state is now facing it. Most companies are facing it, and it is one of the major things that Governor Walker is focused on. How do we maximize the number of people who can work to make sure that they're in the economy, that they're prepared, and that they can come to work to be able to be productive citizens in our state. I'd also like to add that last year, our initial weekly unemployment claims averaged the lowest level since 1989. The facts show that fewer people are filing for unemployment. Again, more people are working. So the indications of what we're seeing in our economy is that it has come back. We're doing very well, but we still have challenges. Our challenges center upon how do we make sure we're maximize the use of our labor force. How do we help Wisconsin companies maintain their competitive advantage, not only within the state, but both nationally and globally. Wisconsin plays a major role in competing in a range of both agricultural, manufacturing, and medical services, both in our region and globally. And so that it may not be clear to you, but this community, like so many communities, your competition may not be within the bounds of our 72 counties. That Wisconsin companies, and many of you are excellent in producing products and services that are exported around the country and the nation. And as the U.S. has come back, so has other parts of the nation, other parts of the world that also was affected by the recession that was global in scale. Now let me talk a little bit about WHEDA's mission. One of the things that I say that's kind of my brand, the brand of WHEDA, is that we do God's work with a balance sheet. We're mission driven, and it is the bond that connects not only the executive director, but the person who sweeps the floors. We have this common focus of how do we help, how do we contribute to helping citizens, whether it's in housing or in economic development, realize their dreams, their opportunities. And so we see the miracles of the work we do. And one of the first ones I saw was 5 years ago here in Watertown. And it was a project that was actually approved and financed before I started at WHEDA. I had the privilege to join the mayor and other dignitaries from the city to cut the ribbon on this project. It's on the Rock River. It's in the downtown. And it had a couple of lessons for me that's really important that I want to share with you of what I think we have to do to have that edge both for our communities and for our state. When I got there, I know we're involved in housing, but there was my colleague from WEDC, there was the mayor, there was other parts of the community that contributed to this project, the work that was done to make sure that it can be properly sited on the river, the work that was done to expand the river walk and parks. And what I realized was that while we contribute to housing, that this project took a broader group of both state and local partners all working in concert. And that's very important. We had to work together. We couldn't kind of be in our own island saying, well, I'm doing my thing and you go do yours. We had to do this in concert. And the hard work was shown by one of the first residents who works for the Watertown School District as a substitute teacher. And as a substitute teacher, she only works part-time. And her housing provided her the opportunity to start the morning in one elementary school, working part-time. And then in the afternoon, because of where the schools were located in the afternoon, work at another school, so that immediately I saw how her housing provided an opportunity where before, where she previously lived, she had no way that she could, in fact, have 2 part-time jobs in a profession that she loved, because she simply didn't have the money for a car, and the distances from one employer to the other was just too great. And it just struck me that she had a great home, but more importantly, it allowed her to work and do the things that were important for her and her family. And I realized that it isn't just the brick and mortar, it isn't just the financing, it isn't just our banking partners. What your neighbor was saying was that she had a home, and that this was the foundation for her to both contribute to her community as a volunteer, to participate in the economy, and to raise her kids. And again, I just saw that as what fundamentally, when it's all said and done, how do we help someone realize their dreams? So let me tell you a little bit more about WHEDA, starting with that mission. And that is to stimulate Wisconsin's economy and improve the quality of life of residents while providing affordable housing and business finance products. Our vision: provide the tools for people and communities to realize their hopes and dreams. Not our dreams, but our tools to help you accomplish what you want for your community and for your neighbors. Our values are people, personal responsibility, communications, customer-driven, excellence in what we do, financial viability, ethics, innovation, and collaboration. And collaboration is just so important because if you take some of the things about branding your town, that can't be done by simply partnership bank. For that brand to have meaning, for the broader community to embrace it and connect with it, takes all of us to do that. And so this idea of collaboration is so important, and it's one of the things I think coming out of the economy that it really requires that we have to get back to how we work together to accomplish what sometimes seem to be intractable challenges, but by our working together, we can really accomplish so much more. And that's what I've seen in the project that I was here 5 years ago and as I've traveled this state. So here's some more information about what WHEDA, and I look at our results as also an indication of the economy. But let me give you a backdrop about WHEDA. WHEDA was created by Wisconsin legislature. We are not a state agency. We receive no tax dollars. And that has everything to do with the founding fathers of this state, because in our Constitution, Wisconsin cannot use taxpayer dollars to invest in private brick and mortar. And in the early 60s, when the new housing programs were coming out, the fear was that Wisconsin would not be able to participate because in other states, they simply had a state authority that received tax revenue. In Wisconsin, that was not our model. And so we had to create a hybrid, created by the public, with a public mission and purpose, but operating privately. We have become, in our 40+ years, a pretty sophisticated authority of raising and deploying capital. We raise capital locally, we raise capital on Wall Street. In fact, the impact of the recession on WHEDA was that those financial institutions that broke our economy broke WHEDA's model, because our typical tool was raising bonds or raising capital through bonds, and one of these unscrupulous companies started using bonding, of which when those investors came for their money, it wasn't there. And the market, fearful that this was broader than just this individual company, pulled back from bonding. Our partners lost their credit rating, although they were operating well. It was simply the market reacting out of the fear of what was going on in public finance. WHEDA, from the month I arrived, January 3rd of 2011, was losing $70 million of balance sheet in the form of prepayment of mortgages. Over the first 4 years, we lost $1 billion from our balance sheet. And that was simply the situation of the residual of first investors and then home buyers going to other products that we couldn't provide because our product was broken. We managed that effortlessly. We did something else, like many other financial institutions, where we previously would raise capital and make mortgages. We shifted to FHA, and in 2009, 10, and 11, FHA mortgage financing for purchasing a home was 90% of the market. So if you were making mortgages, it was likely you were using FHA. That obviously it's improved as the economy's improved, but we had never been an FHA shop. The importance of this affects Wisconsin significantly because before the crash, we controlled our mortgage product. If we looked at a community and saw something both in terms of strength and weaknesses that we thought made sense, we could make that mortgage. That is not the case any longer. We now are dependent upon the secondary market, and they dictate the rules. So how does that affect Wisconsin? Well, instead of having the ability to have someone in the state connect with your community, understand your community, decisions are made on our mortgage product outside of the state. And that is one of the major things that I'm working on to reestablish where we have control again of our mortgage product. We're making mortgages. Last year we finally saw our mortgage portfolio starting to grow. Again, starting in 11, it continued to decline, as I said, at a tune of $70 million of reduction a year. And so coming into the recession, the question was, what could we do? And there were 2 or 3 things we decided. One, we would work very closely with all of the governor's cabinet. And this is, again, back to my point that we all concluded that we could not do this by every agency kind of doing their own thing. We had to have a game plan, and the governor had one, and then we worked as a team to execute it. And the results that you see is in part because of the leadership of the governor and the close working relationship of his cabinet. And I've worked with 2 governors. And one of the things that I would say in the Walker's administration is in what I call the secret sauce is the close working relationship of his cabinet. This is the cabinet will pick up the phone and say, hey, Wyman, I hear you're having this problem. Can I help you do this? Or do you need this? I mean, it was different. It wasn't based on ego. It wasn't based on, I'm more important than you. I should have more attention with the governor. It was, how do we, as a cabinet, help the citizens get back into the economy and be able to compete in the global economy? And these are some of the things that WHEDA has been able to do. One, we looked at housing not only as home and shelter, but how could housing contribute to economic development? Second, we put more focus on raising capital for economic development. And again, because we don't receive GPR, that can be hard sometimes. It's probably the hardest part of the work we do is how do we raise the necessary capital to support small businesses? And then the third was looking at how we could reestablish our program for first-time home buyers. Now, even though we had this turbulent period in the recession, WHEDA has consistently had the second lowest defaults and foreclosures in the nation for our single family borrowers. I don't think that I can claim the credit for that. It's my opinion that has everything to do with one of the words was up there, cautious and conservative. Our consumers, while they may have modest pocketbooks, really pay attention to where they put their dollars, and their word is their bond. We simply don't see people walking away from their homes. We see people working to keep their homes, and we see it in, as I said, some of the lowest defaults and foreclosures in the country. And so our strategy has been, how do we get back into those markets? How do we help in this recession? And it was based upon how do we collaborate both within our products. How do we make $1 do 2 or 3 things? Because there's never enough money. How can we help Watertown produce the housing that it needs, contribute to its public lands, and enliven downtown with the same dollar? That's our approach. How do we try to get more out of every dollar we invest, whether that's in our traditional investment in small business or in housing? So here's some of the highlights of just the 2015 calendar year. These numbers are right off the presses of what we ended up for the calendar year. One of the areas that's important for us, as I said, is financing of housing. Last year, we lent $68 million to finance the construction, rehab, or refinancing of nearly 1,300 homes for seniors, families, and those with special needs. As of December 31, WHEDA had only 9 outstanding loan commitments for $33 million. Simply put, that's kind of what's in the queue. The importance of the $68 million of lending that we did is that our single-family lending and our multifamily lending are counter-cyclical. In the recession, our multifamily housing tends to have the greatest demand. Why? If you are a developer, in many cases, you may not typically come to WHEDA, but your bank simply won't or can't lend you the capital, and so WHEDA becomes the source in a recession. As banks pull back, WHEDA is there, and we're fairly recession-proof on our multifamily. So in 2011, we had a record-breaking year of $135 million of multifamily lending, breaking my old record from the last recession. For many of you young people, you were in diapers. And then in 2012, my colleague broke that record. As the economy improves, many of those developers now, as capital opens up, have lots of choices to go to. And we see a decline in our multifamily. But as the economy comes back, more people are working, improvement in wages, our single family picks up. And so as the recession hits, multifamily goes up, single family goes down. As the recession abates, multifamily goes down, single family picks up. Counter-cyclical. It's all. When I go back and look at the picture, in every recession that has been the pattern, except this one. In this recession, the multifamily did decline, but did not drop off as it had in the past. Our single family has continued to increase. So in 2015, we had a $200 million year, originating some 1,400 loans. And I asked myself, what's going on? And I think, we don't know for sure, we think that part of this is that for many young people, having looked at the recession and the situation where people were out of work, the defaults, foreclosures, or they had a new job but it was in another community, but they had a house in the previous community, and so short sales and figuring out how do I deal with this house that's in community A and my job is now in community B. I think the consumer is saying, you know, maybe if I rent and the economy is better, but maybe it's not there, maybe I won't be tied down and in a situation where I don't have options. That's what I think it is. We don't know yet. We really don't know yet. But we know that multifamily and apartment financing is continuing. It's not only for WHEDA, but across the industry. It's showing up in places like Balsam Lake, a small community in northern Wisconsin. Now that the economy has abated, their companies are doing well, their challenge is not only finding workers, just as your survey said, but also finding adequate housing for their workers. And so what they're finding is people driving long distances. So another lesson for me was New Berlin. In 2012, we financed a project there, downtown New Berlin, and it was again another aha moment. New Berlin had been successful in attracting a major employer to their city. But in the winter months, they had high absenteeism. Why? Because that winter storm would come in, and those workers that had to be at work at 7 o'clock would get there at 8 because of the conditions of the roads, people driving long distances where the roads had not been cleared. Or you can't drive 55 or 65 when there's 4 inches of snow on the roads. You gotta slow down. And so just the winter months, they saw this uncertainty of seeing drop off in their workers. New housing comes in, the ability for people to walk to work. They saw a striking decline in absenteeism. But the mayor said something else about this project in their downtown. It supported the library. They saw more activity in their downtown, more activity in their restaurants. They saw that they didn't have to be a Milwaukee or Chicago to have housing downtown and see greater life in their downtown core. They saw people wanted some of those same things in a smaller community. And so the project was just perfect. The library was across the street. That's where we had the groundbreaking announcement. It was next to a new bike and walking path that connected New Berlin to Ripon, walking distance to their new employer. Again, making $1 do many, many things. And again, this is another example of how housing is helping communities both keep and attract workers or helping companies have their workers in a closer proximity to their job, and that the reduction in time that people are spending commuting went down. In the winter months, absenteeism and tardiness also went down. Just a couple other things. We invest heavily in small businesses. Last year, we invested a little over $1.7 million, mainly in venture. This is merging new companies. Our 1.7 was leveraged with private capital with a little under $5 million in those investments. We have a major economic investment tool that focuses on 3 areas: manufacturing, community health facilities, or community facilities, of which half of those resources are dedicated to the smaller towns and communities of Wisconsin. And so 2 months ago in Platteville, Wisconsin, we broke ground on a project that is a library moving their library from a 13,000 square foot facility to a 26,000 square foot facility, a clinic, and a hotel. The hotel was important because, Mr. President, if you're speaking at UW-Platteville, you have to stay in Iowa because there isn't many hotels in the city. So now there'll be a hotel in downtown Platteville in proximity to UW that will, again, $1 doing multiple things. The library, and again, the library, and if you have libraries here, and if your city leaders are here, you know those are owned by the city. But the library needed a bigger space. The previous library space became the clinic. And then of course, the boutique hotel that will cater to the various individuals and dignitaries, mainly with the university, but broader than that, of having lodging in the downtown is just a major plus. Over the 5 years that I've been executive director, this now includes the 2015 numbers, WHEDA has, over a 5-year period, has done $1.4 billion of both housing, first-time home buying, lending, and economic development lending. That's, over that 5 years, we financed 23,000 units. And every one of those units has a story. Every one of them is a family that is able to participate in their community, raise their kids, and have the ability to work in their community. Lastly, we're going through a strategic planning process. And we're asking ourselves, now that the recession is over, what is it that we can do that can even improve our efforts? And we basically decided that we're going to focus on a strategy that will close out this decade, a strategic statement for the period from 2017 to 2020 that focuses on 4 broad but very ambitious goals. They are focused on expanding home ownership, increasing housing independence, assisting cities and communities in revitalization, and to preserve the existing housing that we have in this state. So first, let me talk about home ownership. One of the big challenges this state has is that our population is flat. Now, those of us who are baby boomers who are getting ready to leave the workforce, when we look out at the demographics of Wisconsin, there simply isn't a major bulge of workforce. The millennials aren't there yet. They're coming, but they're not there yet. But more importantly, even when you bake in the millennials, when you go out in time, Wisconsin's population growth is expected to be flat. What that means is that our growth in workers will be flat. It means that the young people we have here in all of our universities and colleges, of which we do an excellent job, we have to have a strategy to keep them here. One of our biggest exports is our college graduates. We educate them, we prepare them well, and they walk out of the university and they leave the state. Our strategy is to help young people stay here. One of the ideas we're working on, our nickname for it is sheepskin serfs. And those of you who are parents or students who know how much student debt you have, that student debt is a barrier to buying a home. When I was in the university, that was not the case, but we live in different times. So the question is, what can we do to help our young people as they finish school to stay here and buy a home? We're also asking ourselves, how can we help them start businesses? And we see starting in places like Madison, where there are entrepreneurial funds that aren't even waiting until the young person graduates. They're actually saying, hey, why don't you come in as a partner in the company in your junior year before you finish your master's, before you finish your dissertation, because they see the talent is so great, they're not waiting till they graduate. They're basically signing them up sometimes in their freshman and sophomore years. And so one of our goals is how do we help young people who want to start businesses here. And of course, you know, whether you're buying a home or starting a business, you have to have capital, and so that's one of our challenges we're looking at. Increasing housing independence. One of the big challenges will be housing choices for baby boomers, particularly in the area of senior housing. And remember, the baby boomers were the Pepsi generation. They are not going to want to have the same type of housing choices as their parents and grandparents. And we're taking a close look at that. And how do we help someone who now that 4-bedroom house is way too big, they don't need it. You know, the governor's a good example. He just put his house up. Why? Both his kids are in college. It's just him and the first lady in a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom house. So they're putting their house up because they're now empty nesters. And many of us have had that experience. So how do we help seniors, whether they're empty nesters? And sometimes that help, again, in some communities, because there aren't housing choices for seniors who have those large homes, those young families with kids that need that type of housing, they can't get it because there hasn't been enough new housing built, and the existing housing that fits their needs is occupied. Without being able to put that new product out there, freeing up that home will make it harder for that family to find the home they're looking for. And then the need for addressing housing with services. The data is very clear that for a range of from folks who have both physical and mental disability to a range of addictions, that if you want to see that person improve, they must have stable housing. And because we've now seen that because people don't have stable housing, that it is an issue. I just returned yesterday with our Department of Health to look at how do we integrate Medicaid in housing. And I heard all these examples of individuals who are bipolar and that they have the right treatment plan, but their housing is so unstable. But when they get into stable housing, they're more likely to both take their meds, stay on their meds, and the meds have effect. Why? Because if, you know, just think about it. We all, when we go home today, we put that key in the lock. There's this little thing about stability and a place you can call home. There are people who don't have that, and the stress and concerns of that complicates their healing. And so we're looking at how can we work with health to improve housing for these range of populations, of which the result will be savings that could mean lower taxes, better utilization of services, and a better utilization of your dollars, whether they're federal dollars or state dollars. And so these are just two of the ways in which we think our new strategic plan between now and the end of the decade can help. And I'll end on communities, since I am in one of the great communities of Wisconsin. WHEDA is here to work with you to be your partner, to help you accomplish the goals of your community. The work that's been done on your brand, the work of every year polling businesses is so important. We're doing the same thing. All of our strategic plan, we're now in that session of listening. We begin that next week where we're simply going to sit down and listen to these various communities and interests. We haven't gotten to the communities yet. That's coming. But all of that is centered upon our deepening our understanding of the needs, concerns, and opportunities in the state, and how WHEDA can help that young family buy their first home, help that worker find affordable housing in close proximity to their job, or help communities maintain their competitiveness, whether that is supporting their downtown, supporting a range of housing choices, or supporting attracting companies and keeping companies in their community. Thank you.
All right, what questions do you have? Really?
Okay, now, I'm going to turn around. If you don't have questions, I'm going to ask you questions. So,
My kind of guy.
in fact, for me, it's the most important part is to be able to hear what's on your mind, what your questions are, or your suggestions. So, please.
What is the advantage of WHEDA? I mean, you're saying in the multifamily and recessions we're better, is that because they offer easier borrowing terms, or is the money less expensive to borrow from there than a conventional lending institution?
So the question is, what is the advantage WHEDA has in a recession, particularly for a multifamily? Is it cheaper money, easier terms? It's a little bit of that. First and foremost is availability. This is my second tour duty at WHEDA, was noted. The largest loan that I made in my history of running multifamily was during the recession. A Class A developer doing a solid project, but it was a multi-million-dollar project, and this developer couldn't find a bank in the heat of the recession to save his life. And so one was availability. The second is many times we have not the lowest, but some of the lowest on multifamily. And then I would say on terms, they can vary, but part of, if you're doing a, you're coming to us as a developer and you're borrowing $20 million, you got to bring something to the table also, as well as have the financial strength that not only from the point in which we close it, but a year, 2 years, 5 years later, that you have the financial strength to both manage that asset. And so it's a combination of availability, lower cost financing, and sometimes terms. But I'll tell you what, I was up in Superior and I was meeting with a customer who does a lot of business in Minnesota. And one of the things they said was, you guys are far easier to work with. And I think it has everything to do with that we're created by the states and we have a public mission, but we operate like a private company. So less bureaucratic, we operate a lot faster. And my customer was saying something that we would get done from the minute you submit application to closing 8 weeks had taken them 8 months and counting. And so because we have a private sector sensibility, we're not as fast as the private sector, but we're certainly faster than traditional government. And that's the fourth benefit that I think we have across any of our products.
What other questions?
Where does WHEDA get its funding?
Our single family primarily, well, let me lump them together simpler. So mainly we raise our capital by issuing bonds. WHEDA we're $2 billion in assets, about $700 million of core capital. We're rated by both S&P and Moody's, so that anytime we do a bond issue, the rating agencies take a really hard look at it. The last quarter of last year, we did our first single-family bond issue since the crash, and then a month later, we did a multifamily. And that process is that we have investment bankers, they get the contract, they go out and sell those bonds. Those investors get the bonds, we get the cash, and we put it out in housing. But because of our financial strength, we have the ability to self-fund. And what that means is that on our single family, since this was our, coming back to the dance, if you will, we had originated $50 million of single family loans on our nickel just to hedge our debt. So before we went out to the private market, we wanted to be absolutely sure. When we closed that $200 million transaction, we paid ourselves back. And so that's the other way. We have our own capital. And then we are very good at going after federal resources. One of the major resources that we've been able to attract to Wisconsin is a resource called the New Market Tax Credit. And Wisconsin ranks 4th among the states in New Market awards. To me, that's extraordinary. We've brought $1.5 billion of this resource to Wisconsin, not by ourselves. We contribute 1/3 of that $1.5 billion. But again, that secret sauce I mentioned of working together, all of the other players that brought the other billion, we work really closely together. And so whether there's a project in West Allis, the city of West Allis was doing flex office space. They had New Market. We did the debt part of the financing. They used the tax credits. And so it's either bonds or it's tax credits. And both of these work on the basis, in the case of bonds, a bond might have a face value, we promise to pay you 5%, but because of the federal law, you don't pay taxes on the interest you accrue. Your effective rate of your return might be 6.75 or a little bit below 7. So you get a very good rate. And on the other tax, that's on the bond side, on the tax credits, it operates the same way. But I have to add this because it's so important given that question. The other part of our strategic plan is to de-risk ourselves from the federal government. What that means is that if Congress does what has been discussed for the last decade and rewrite the tax code, it has the greatest opportunity of eviscerating WHEDA. Simply put, as you lower the tax rate, the private benefit that you get of buying our bonds or anyone else's in the public space or purchasing the tax credits we have go down, and other investment opportunities are going to give you a greater return. And we don't know when that's going to occur, but I can assure you there's going to be sometime in the future a new tax code, and it has the greatest risk of making all of what we do go away. And so our strategy is, we don't know when that's going to occur, but our focus is to move away from our dependency on federal resources so that when that occurs, we're better equipped to continue our mission.
One more? Who's fasting?
Yeah, I'm not sure which one of the facilities in town you were referring to 5 years ago, but we do have 2 on the river, which have been built within the last probably 5 to 8 years. And the first one is seniors only, and the second one is mixed between basic low income and and the rental rates are based on the income, and there's some market rate units in each of those buildings. Is that a requirement for your loans that there's a certain income level?
The answer to that is yes, and it varies based upon the funding source. So of the two projects that you mentioned, the non-senior was the one I'm fairly sure was the one we financed. It used a program called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program. It mainly provides to a developer equity, right? And that simply says when that project was built, it had lower debt, and the federal government says, because we gave you that equity, reduce your debt, means that greater cash flow. You split that cash flow, some of it goes in your pocket, your return, and the portion of it goes in lower long-term rents. And the Congress set rules on who can go into those units. And one of the misnomers I remind people to say, well, we think your housing isn't working because you simply providing housing for people who don't work on public assistance. Public housing does housing for people who are on public assistance. The housing we do is for people who work because you have to pay the rent. And the rents are at a level that traditional public assistance would not meet that requirement. Now, there's some exceptions to that. The exceptions are homeless housing or housing for certain special populations who, by virtue of their physical or mental condition, may not be able to work, and consequently the income they have might be modest. But for the most part, the housing we do, I would describe as workforce, and the rules are set at 3 levels. The federal government, the second is sometimes by state government through state law, and then third is WHEDA. As an example, one of the things we're looking at now, and this may not be an issue here in Watertown. It is in Madison, Milwaukee, maybe Racine and other cities, and that is they develop their downtown, apartment rents are going up. And so you have middle-class families who incomes are too high for the programs I've described, but they still can't rent the place they need. And I've been watching this in both Madison and Milwaukee, where you're seeing more rentals coming in at $2,000 a month. And and if you got 2 professionals, a couple, you might be able to make that work. But if you got kids, it doesn't work. And so this is a group that's caught between the programs that's helping working families, but their income's too high, but the market has moved so rapidly that their incomes are not enough to get the type of housing that they're looking for. So one of the things we're looking at is that if we're not using federal resources, we would have the ability that if there was a need in a given community to serve higher income families, we would have the ability, if we can show proof of that, to help that segment of the market.
Anyone else?
I want to hear some questions from young people. I want at least one. Or I'm going to ask you questions. So,
Hang on.
You call it your secret sauce. I just want to know how you encourage your close working cabinet.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
How you encourage these close relationships with your cabinet.
Well, first, I think it first starts with the individuals that the governor. I think it first starts with the group of individuals that the governor has appointed, excluding myself. They're smart, they're hardworking, they're committed, but they also are humble. The eagles aren't the first thing that walks in the room. And I think that's just so important. Second, the governor sits down with his cabinet every other week. And once a month, we have a dinner together. We have a great time. Sometimes I'm like, man, we're having fun. Is that what we should be doing? But we get a lot of work done. So that the combination of the leadership, and then the other part of this is the governor encourages it, and he manages by objectives. He's not a micromanager, but he sets goals. And again, every week, I provide a report that simply says, what did we do this week? Go get that report tomorrow. What did WHEDA do to move the ball? Every agency submits that report tomorrow, and I've done it every week since being appointed. And so the combination of the reporting, the leadership, the people who are appointed, many of you know the history of the Packers. And when Lombardi came here, one of the things that that was in there wasn't just the physicality of the players. It's players in every league. But if you look closely, you saw there was a chemistry. It was something other than just you could run or pass or catch. There was a belief that we could do better, and there was a camaraderie and a chemistry that from afar you wouldn't see it, but that human quality of people working together, enjoying each other's company, and having a common goal. And I would say all of those things are part of why I can say what I can say about that secret sauce. I talked to my peers in other states. Let me just give you one. One of the people who I work closely with is Lieutenant Governor Clayfish. I'll be honest, in most states, lieutenant governors are mantelpieces, right? I mean, it's like the vice president. You only have one job, and that is if something happens to the chief executive, you step in. So you don't have an agency or department. Well, when Governor Walker came in, the first thing I knew was different was sitting to his right was the lieutenant governor. In the past, lieutenant governors never was part of cabinet, certainly not when I was in the previous administration. Second, she had a focus on small business, and she also worked with all of the agencies, whether it was WEDC, DADCAP, or WHEDA. And I mention that because I talked to her counterparts in other states. They don't see the cabinet. They never participate. They maybe barely see the governor. In some states, the cabinet might only meet 2 or 3 times a year, or one-on-ones. I mean, so we have a cabinet twice a month, and then once a month there's a one-on-one with the governor's staff, where we just look at what's in front of us, what we got done. And so there's really good communications, and that role of the lieutenant governor, to me, I thought was brilliant. So here you got a smart, hard-working woman, got elected on her own. Why would you just put her on the sidelines and not use her? I thought the governor was brilliant. He put her to work, and not just, work to say she's doing something, but critical pieces of what was important to him, whether it was around small businesses or looking at the environment in which you as communities or companies come in. And I just thought it was a brilliant and a good example of that secret sauce, because very few governors use their lieutenant governor that way, both in being part of the cabinet as well as involved in key policy initiatives of his administration.
All right, well, Wyman, thank you so much for coming today.